I used to think silence was peace. Turns out, silence can also be camouflage, a way for the world to sneak up on you while you think you're finally alone. My name's Henry Callan, and for 15 years, I worked counterintelligence for the federal government. My life revolved around noise, phones ringing, radios squawking, constant chatter about people who shouldn't be trusted. After all that, I promised myself that one day I'd live somewhere I didn't have to hear another voice unless I wanted to. That promise led me here, to a cabin a mile up a dirt road in the Colorado foothills, tucked between cedar ridges and a lake that reflects the sky so clearly it feels like a mirror of heaven itself. My father would have loved this place. He taught me that peace wasn't the absence of trouble, it was the ability to breathe. While trouble searched for you and couldn't find your door. I hung his old flag from the porch beam the day I moved in. It hasn't come down since. The cabin was small, 2 rooms, wood stove, metal roof that drummed like rain on an old snare. I rebuilt most of it myself, weekend after weekend. Replaced cracked boards, rewired the fence, sanded the porch, until the cedar smelled like memory. It wasn't luxury, it was legacy. Every nail and beam felt like it belonged to the story my father left behind. 6 months after settling in, I stopped checking my phone altogether. I'd wake before sunrise, brew coffee, sit with my boots on the railing, and watch light crawl down the mountainside. The only sound was the rustle of pine needles, the soft clink of my father's mug against the wooden armrest. Then one ordinary Tuesday, I found it. A white envelope on my gate. No postage. Just a gold embossed logo. Maple Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. At first, smiled. Figured it was a neighborly welcome letter. I wasn't wrong about the neighborly part, but I sure was about the welcome. Inside was a typed message written with that brand of politeness that cuts deeper than an insult. We'd like to include your property within our community vision for aesthetic unity and shared responsibility. Aesthetic unity, that was their code for we want control. I fed the letter straight into the wood stove. The flame ate it quickly, as if even fire didn't want to digest that kind of arrogance. A week later came a thicker envelope, this one sealed like a court summons. Inside was a formal integration proposal. 15 pages printed on heavy stock. Stapled neatly, they wanted me to repaint my cabin to match HOA-approved earth tones. They wanted me to remove my satellite dish, claiming it was visual pollution. They wanted me to replace my solid cedar fence with decorative pickets for community cohesion. I read every line twice, then stapled my own note to the top. I am not, nor have I ever been, a member of your association. My property lies outside your jurisdiction. Any further contact will be treated as harassment. Signed it, scanned it, and mailed copies to both the HOA and the county assessor's office. Then I made coffee and waited for the quiet to return. It didn't. 2 days later, I noticed a camera mounted on the power pole near the entrance to my drive. Brand new lens, pointed directly at my gate. The kind of model you don't buy from a hardware store at first. I thought maybe the county had installed it road monitoring, maybe. But when I checked my own perimeter feed, I caught the same black SUV parked across the road every afternoon, engine running, tinted windows, different license plates each day. I wasn't scared. I was trained for worse. But I was angry, not the loud kind of anger. The slow burn that sits behind your ribs and waits. So I expanded my motion sensors, scrambled the frequencies on my network, and logged everything. Plates, faces, timestamps. I built a file so neat even my old supervisors would have been proud for about a week. Nothing happened. Then the walkers started. Dog walkers with no dogs. Joggers without sweat. Teenagers pretending to film nature documentaries 30 feet from my fence. They'd drift closer. Sometimes stepping over the property line, always with phones up, always recording. It was surveillance, amateur, sloppy, but targeted. I didn't confront them. I just documented. That's what professionals do. We collect evidence while the amateurs perform then. One freezing morning in late November, I heard at the doorbell. Not a normal ring, the long, hammering kind you feel in your bones. It was 5:30 a.m. I rolled out of bed, slipped on my boots, grabbed the Glock from the bedside safe, and opened my phone. Two figures stood on the porch, the same navy jackets. The HOA logo stitched like a badge of honor. One carried a clipboard, the other, a shoulder camera. They looked like actors in a cheap documentary about authority. I opened the inner door but kept the screen latched. "You're trespassing," I said calmly. "You have 10 seconds to explain before you're on a police report." Clipboard guy stepped forward. "Sir, we're conducting a compliance inspection on behalf of Maple Ridge Estates." "This property is private," I said. "Not under your jurisdiction. You have no authority here." Camera guy didn't flinch. He zoomed in on my face and said quietly, "We have the right to document non-compliance under Section 5.2 of the Community Integration Act." I stared at him for a second. "There is no such act," I said. "You made that up." Then, without another word, he pulled out his phone and dialed. "Yes, 911. He said evenly. "We're with the Maple Ridge HOA. The homeowner is refusing lawful entry and may be armed." That word armed landed like a stone in my chest. I shut the door, took one long breath, and went into operational mode. Body cam on, perimeter feed rolling. The morning after the deputies left, the quiet didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a lid. The kind you place over a pot to keep it from boiling over. I walked the fence line with my father's mug in one hand and a notepad in the other, jotting small fixes I didn't really need to make. A loose staple on the south camera cable, a cracked insulator on the gate sensor, a hinge that squeaked in the cold. None of it mattered, but my mind needed order. By my mid-afternoon, I'd filed my own report, exported clips from the perimeter system, and duplicated them onto 3 drives. One stayed in the cabin safe, one went to a lockbox in town, and one I mailed to my attorney, Dale Ross. Belt, suspenders, and a spare pair of pants. Old habits at dusk, I set the mug on the porch rail, where the rim had left a faint ring over the years. My father's initials, worn into the handle by time, pressed a warm crescent into my palm. The flag snapped twice in a crosswind, and I told myself out loud, "We do this clean." I wasn't speaking to the HOA, I was speaking to my own temper. The next morning, Dale's name lit my phone. Subject line, "You need to see this." The attachment was a scanned record from the county clerk's office. For a few seconds, it looked like procedural garbage. Then my stomach dropped. A new filing sat under my parcel number. Community alignment agreement supposedly signed by me 5 days earlier. The signature looked like mine in the way a mask looks like a face. The loops were too smooth, the slant too disciplined. Anyone who'd seen my handwriting would spot the fake in a second. But a clerk who processes 1,000 sheets a week might not. I called Dale before my blood decided to sprint. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me you're already on it," I said. "I'm already on it," he replied. "Forgery, false filing, electronic submission, under color of authority. We'll file criminal and civil, both." "Good," I said, and forced my voice back to level. "Let's make the paper trail louder than their gossip." We moved like a 2-man crew that had built houses together for years. He drafted a restraining order to keep any HOA personnel off my property. I bundled maps, boundary overlays, the 5:30 a.m. footage into clean packets labeled like case exhibits. If there was a clerical desk anywhere in the county that could be confused by a form, I wanted the truth to hit it like a brick with a bow on it. Then one upgraded the physical side. New IR illuminators on the north fence. Fresh batteries in the motion grid. A second gate sensor with redundancy. And because symbolism sometimes matters, I bolted a small steel plaque onto the post beneath my father's flag. "Private land nitrogen, monoxide, HOA access. Trespassers will be prosecuted. The wind pushed the flag out straight as if to underline the sentence. 2 nights later, the camera on the entrance caught a sedan gliding to a halt at 1:14 a.m. A hooded figure slid out, looped a heavy chain through my gate, and snapped a padlock stamped with Mr. E. Maple Ridge Estates like a cattle brand. Then the person dropped a contractor bag at my tire line and vanished into their own exhaust. I cut the chain at sunrise and photographed every link. Inside the bag, HOA newsletters, stale coffee cups, a cracked bottle of wine, and a soggy yard sign. Classy as a mudslide in a tuxedo, I sent the clip to Deputy Ramos with a short note. New incident. Evidence attached. No immediate danger. Logging for record. He replied with a thumbs up and on file. We'll swing by this week. That afternoon, another visitor came, the kind that wears a friendly windbreaker and reads from a script. He introduced himself as Field Officer Hammond from the Department of Environmental Compliance and said he'd received concerns about firearms and unlicensed animal enclosures. I gestured to the open acreage. Closest thing to a cage here is a birdhouse. Want a tour? He did. Camera on, clipboard ready, polite as a math teacher. He checked the shed, peered behind the woodpile, noted the model number on my safe, like it mattered to some form. He found exactly what anyone with eyes would find. Nothing illegal. It's nothing unsafe. Nothing worth a second knock. Back in the driveway, he cleared his throat. Sorry to waste your time. You didn't, I said. Just bring a jacket next time. It gets cold up here when folks lie. He smiled despite himself, shook my hand, and left. From the roadside camera, I watched a gray SUV drift into the slot where the sedan had been 2 nights before. It idled with the patience of an amateur stakeout. The driver, Dan Weller, HOA board member, with a smile like teeth and a picket fence, his tablet toward my windows while pretending to photograph pine cones. I didn't wave. I didn't walk down. I wrote Weller 1508, his tablet aimed at, say, Windows Vehicle Gray SUV plate, noted in the harassment log, and moved on with my day. Let him keep posing. Some stories end when the posing stops. The next escalation arrived by way of pixels. Dale texted a link and nothing else. I tapped it and was greeted by soft piano over drone footage, sunlit sidewalks, matching mailboxes, a golden retriever sprinting through perfectly trimmed grass. The channel banner read Maple Living, now a lifestyle brand, wearing an HOA lanyard at 30 seconds. The star of the show arrived, KarenChronicles, president of Maple Ridge Estates, in a red blazer that looked allergic to wrinkles. She spoke to the camera with a practiced warmth that never touched her eyes. The title card floated up like a threat inside a smile. Who is the man in the cabin? For 5 minutes, they narrated a portrait of a paranoid recluse who hoarded weapons, distrusted community, and hid behind private property like a bunker wall. They blurred my roofline as if anonymity softened the smear. The comments hit like gravel in a dryer. He sounds dangerous. Just follow the rules. Why move there if you hate people? I watched the whole thing without pausing. Then I watched it again, and my jaw unclenched by the time the last chord faded. Anger is a short fuse. Proof is a fuse that leads somewhere. I called Dale. We can file defamation, he said, already anticipating the question. But that invites a theater show, and they own the stage lights. I don't need a spotlight, I said. I need daylight. That night, I set my own camera on the porch, the flag in frame, and the forged document under my palm. No drone, no piano, no glitter. Just a clear voice, a steady picture, the plainest facts I could stack in a straight line. My name is Henry Kalin, I began, tone level, hands visible. This cabin sits outside Maple Ridge Estates. I did not sign this community alignment agreement. This is a forgery. These are the same people who showed up at 5:30 in the morning and called 911. I refused to let them enter without a warrant. Then I played the clips. the buzzer screaming at dawn. The clipboard guy inventing laws, the call where possibly armed, floated in the air like a preloaded story. The padlocked gate. The trash bag. The harmless compliance inspection that found exactly nothing. Weller's tablet lifting toward my windows. Each segment stamped with time and date until the whole sequence felt less like a complaint and more like a ledger. I ended with a line that would be true in any century. I've dealt with organized criminals who were more honest than this. I uploaded the video and went to bed with the lights off and the cameras on. By sunrise, the view count had leapfrogged theirs. Before noon, it had doubled. The comments this time came with receipts. Homeowners from other states. A rancher in Nevada who'd seen a near-identical playbook. A woman in Texas who'd fought a filing she'd never signed. Most wrote to say they were sorry. Some wrote to say, document everything. A few sent PDFs. Karen's video vanished quietly within 2 days, removed by uploader. Of course it did. Truth ages like oak. Lies go soft in the rain. Still, absence is not surrender. In my line of work, silence usually means planning. On the third morning, as steam rose from my second cup, I heard clapping carry up the ridge like polite thunder. I grabbed binoculars and scanned the slope toward the property line. A cluster of residents in pastel jackets, gathered near a fresh wooden sign staked into the soil where the old service road curved toward the trees, a ribbon arched between two poles. A cameraman in khakis framed Karen in the center like a candidate on a postcard. She raised scissors and smiled at a crowd that wanted to believe in pretty words. The sign read, Maple Ridge Legacy Park, in honor of our veterans. My mouth went dry in the way it does when your body mistakes anger for thirst. The bench they'd installed sat 15 feet on my side of the border. A small maple sapling, its roots wrapped in burlap, waited beside a shallow hole that cut into my ground like a signature. I set the mug down next to the flagpole and whispered, all right, not to Karen, not to the crowd. To myself, then I called Dale. They're over the line, I said. Photos. Better, I said. You'll have survey overlays in your inbox before lunch? I walked the boundary with the same calm I used at the porch camera. A GoPro on my chest. A printed plat map in my hand. A survey app open on my phone. I photographed each stake, each fluorescent twine line, each boot print where the ground still held the shape of their confidence. Back inside, I layered images. Official plat over aerial imagery. GPS points over the video frames, dates over every still. When I hit export, the file read like a confession no one had intended to write. Dale filed for a temporary injunction that afternoon. Unlawful occupation of private land, misappropriation of property for public use. A TTEMPTED annexation via fraudulent boundary representation. It was a mouthful, designed to fit into a judge's ear. That evening, uploaded a short video, only maps and footage, no commentary. Side-by-sides of the recorded boundary and their park, the bench blinking on and off the line like a bad magic trick. The final frame held white text on black. This isn't community. It's conquest. The response was swift. Some locals asked sharp questions. A few HOA members who'd clapped under the ribbon suddenly remembered errands. An anonymous email landed with minutes. From a recent board meeting, phrases like strategic, community expansion, and legacy projects underlined. In a pen that pressed hard, I couldn't prove the minutes were real. I also couldn't shake the feeling that people were beginning to step away from the heat. They'd helped light 2 mornings later. A White County truck rolled up with 2 surveyors in orange vests and a supervisor whose expression belonged to someone who'd been dragged into one too many neighborhood fights. They set GPS tripods, took measurements, and compared the numbers with my map. The supervisor clicked his pen shut and said, it's his land. Clear as day. By sunset, a halt order went up. The ribbon came down. The bench lifted onto a dolly, and wheeled away. The sign came out in splinters. The maple sapling, planted shallow and proud, was left standing at the edge of the hole. I told the crew to leave it. Trees aren't guilty of the shovels that placed them. Karen did not sulk. True believers don't. She pivoted. By evening, a petition circulated online. Preserve our park. Protect our values. The introduction tasted like sugar on glass. One man's paranoia shouldn't erase community hope. The share count climbed. The comments framed me as a selfish hermit. They called the map elastic, called boundaries interpretive. I read through 100 messages without blinking. Then I called Dale. "She's not done," I said. "She's never done," he replied. "And now she's given us cover? For what? For the part where we stop swatting at the smoke and find the fire? If you want to know what a machine is for, follow the oil. If you want to know what a committee is for, follow the money." We filed discovery tied to the injunction, aiming for Maple Ridge's finances. The request felt like asking polite questions while handing someone a backhoe. A week later, clerk with a patient soul and a dislike for bullies slid a stack of filings across Dale's desk. We spread them out under a lamp like hunters' cleaning gear after a long season. Their books were a maze of neat names and sloppy purpose, an operating account that bled into a community improvement trust, a heritage enrichment fund that didn't appear on any member-facing summary, and a third buried deeper called the Maple Legacy Initiative. Money moved between them like cups in a street. Trick 5,000 here, 10,000 they're always busy. Rarely explained. A check memo snagged my eye. Community compliance. Optimization. $6,800 to a consultant with a name that looked stubbornly familiar. Karen Hollis. Dale made a sound humans only make when a theory gets teeth. "This isn't mere incompetence," he said. "It's benefit. Personal benefit." He didn't guess. We called Jack Harlow, retired IRS auditor, now a one-man watchdog agency with a laptop and a moral allergy to cooked books. I forwarded him the ledgers, the checks, the memos, the minutes, the petition screenshots. He asked 3 questions, then told me he'd call back. He did 3 days later. At dawn, as the cold made the porch boards creak, "They're filing as a non-profit civic league," he said. "But they're funneling funds into what looks like private enormement. That's felony territory if it sticks." "So we make it stick," I said. He chuckled. "You're not much for halfway, are you? Not when my father's flag is flying over forged paperwork." 2 formal complaints went out that afternoon. IRS whistleblower unit at the federal level and the state HOA regulatory board with jurisdiction over nonprofit compliance. Each packet included annotated ledgers, side-by-side comparisons of public reports and internal flows, and a tidy list of names tied to signatures. Then came the waiting, which I filled with work. I built a second copy of the entire case file on paper. In a binder thick enough to stop a .22, I added tabs for each incident, each letter, each video still. I taped a small photo inside the front cover, a sepia shot of my father at 30, standing by a fence line he'd set with a post hole digger and a stubborn grin. He'd taught me that the truth doesn't contest territory. It occupies it. Karen refused to be quiet. She called a town hall inside the Maple Ridge clubhouse. The theme was threats to community stability and digital misinformation. I wasn't invited, but I didn't need a chair to know what would be said. A neighbor recorded most of it on a phone that shook when the crowd agreed. Karen's speech was polished like a front step before company arrives. She warned about isolated individuals, undermining cohesion, about outsiders hiding behind technicalities, about weaponized documentation and border elasticity. Young attorney from the city offered academic phrases that sounded like expensive air. Cohesion doctrines, border rationalization, collective aesthetic interest. Words that dissolve as soon as they hit a statute. I watched the video twice with the sound off. The faces in the crowd told the real story. A few eager, some bored, several uneasy. True believers clapped the loudest. The rest glanced at the exits. When the camera panned back to the stage, Karen lifted that red blazer's chin and said, "We will not be intimidated." The audience clapped like a weather report about sun. I closed the file on my laptop and leaned back until the chair tapped the wall. Sunlight pushed through the window above the sink and made a rectangle on the cedar. I traced it with my finger and thought about all the rectangles I'd traced in my career windows. Screens, evidence frames, boxes for signatures. Paper gives bullies courage. Paper also gives patient men victory. 2 weeks later, the knock at my door sounded nothing like a buzzer. It was firm and professional and timed with the rhythm of people who don't need theatrics. I opened it to find a sheriff's deputy and a man in a gray suit holding a clipboard thicker than my binder. "Mr. Kalin," the man said. "I'm Investigator Langley with State Regulatory Affairs. The IRS and our office have initiated parallel actions. We're here with a warrant for search and seizure at the Maple Ridge HOA office. Based on documentation you and your counsel submitted." I looked at the flag, then back at him. "Would you like coffee for the drive?" He smiled like someone who has heard that offer from decent people before. "We'll be fine. Thank you." From my truck on the ridge, I watched the unmarked SUVs roll up to the HOA's Colonial headquarters. 2 patrol units idled curbside. Agents went in, came out with bankers' boxes labeled in red. Ledgers. External drives, petitions, membership forms. A dolly skipped over the threshold with a laptop case, perched like a guilty conscience. Then Karen walked out into the light in that same red blazer, posture set to commanding. She strode toward Investigator Langley, words firing the way people speak when they think volume is evidence. He listened, expression like still water. When she finished, he presented the warrant. Her face didn't fall. It fractured microcracks around the mouth, eyes that forgot where to look. She wasn't a villain to me in that moment. She was a person who had built a ladder out of paper and now faced a sky that didn't care. One deputy emerged holding a fat folder of blank forms already pre-filled with names, addresses, and declarations of voluntary integration. My forged signature was just a proof of concept. The stack was a plan. Karen saw me across the street. Her mouth shaped words I didn't need to hear to understand. "This isn't over." I did the one thing that had become my comfort in all of this. I didn't reply. Back home, I set the binder on the table and slid my father's photo out from the cover. I placed it beside the mug. 2 anchors. 1 memory. The wind moved the flag in a slow arc outside the window. The phone rang. "Dale, they found an internal training video," said disbelief wrapped in satisfaction. A session where Karen instructs compliance officers how to assert entry without legal authority. She literally uses the phrase, "most homeowners cave," if you cite cohesion doctrine confidently. It's on a staffer's tablet, time-stamped. "Then our patience has a witness," I said. He exhaled. "And the money." "The money spoke," he said. "Checks to her. Transfers among funds that don't exist on member reports. The IRS flagged a fresh movement this morning while the warrant was in play. That's when the federal case activated." I walked to the doorway and looked out at the maple sapling standing where the bench had once sat. Its small leaves still, its roots deciding. The morning air had that thin, high quality that makes sound travel farther than it should. Somewhere down the slope, an agent told a cameraman to step back. The sentence reached me like a line tossed over water. I sat and let everything settle into its proper boxes. Not the banker's kind. The kind your mind builds when it's tired and ready to file closure under the correct letter. This wasn't pride. It wasn't vindication. It was the relief you feel when a house stops creaking because the storm has moved past. It doesn't mean the roof is eternal. It means it held. I poured another cup, held the warmth in both hands, and told the empty room what I'd told it the day I moved in. We do this clean. The raid at Maple Ridge wasn't the end of anything. It was the start of the reckoning. For 3 days, the local paper ran headlines about financial irregularities under review. Oh, shit. Neighbors who'd once nodded politely now looked down at their driveways when I passed in town. Guilt is a quiet language. You hear it in the silence that used to be greetings. 2 board members lawyered up. Before breakfast the next morning. By the end of the week, both had flipped. They handed over emails that spelled out everything we'd suspected. Forged forms, phony consulting fees, and a slush fund labeled Community Enrichment Reserve. It was community enrichment, in the same way a robbery is wealth redistribution. Dale called one evening while the sun was a coin on the ridge. "They're rolling this up to federal court," he said. "Wire fraud, tax fraud, forgery, conspiracy." I didn't answer right away. The wind blew across the porch and moved the flag like a breath. "I'm not celebrating," I said finally. "Just relieved someone's counting the truth instead of my fence posts." The indictment landed a month later. Karen Hollis at the top of the list, followed by her vice chair, treasurer, and 2 compliance officers. The same men who'd banged on my door that morning were now defendants number 4 and 5. Justice has a sense of humor if you let it. The trial opened in Denver federal court, with more reporters than spectators. Karen arrived in a navy suit 2 sizes too big, makeup trying to fill the space where confidence used to live. The prosecutor started with numbers, moved to forgeries, then played the training. Video we'd helped recover, the one where Karen taught her team to assert entry confidently, even without legal authority. It's the sound of her own voice in a courtroom. Did more damage than any cross-examination could. Ramos testified next. He described the 5:30 a.m. call, the false report, the lack of a warrant. His notes matched my footage frame for frame. When the jury saw the clip of Karen's team dialing 911 from my porch, the room went so quiet you could hear the HVAC kick on. By day 5, the verdict wasn't in doubt to anyone but the defense. Guilty on every count. 13 years for Karen, no parole for 7. 6 each for her to board lieutenants. Probation and a permanent ban for the door knockers. When the judge read the sentence, Karen didn't cry. She just looked at the floor as if she expected it to open and swallow her before the bailiff could. The rest of the board resigned that afternoon. The state dissolved Maple Ridge Estates HOA by emergency order. The words on the paper were simple. Governing body terminated for fraudulent practice and malfeasance. It was the most beautiful bureaucratic sentence I'd ever read. A month later, an official letter arrived at my cabin with a state seal and a check for $712,000 damages, legal fees, and unauthorized property use. I read the apology once, then fed it to the same wood stove that had eaten their first invitation. The check went in the desk drawer until the flames cooled. I spent the money the way a man spends forgiveness, carefully. New fencing, steel-reinforced gates, better cameras, and 5 acres of buffer land beyond the old line. Then I commissioned a sign that now hangs where their padlock once did, private property. Natro trespassers will be sued into oblivion. Neighbors say it's a bit dramatic. I say it's accurate. A local journalist wrote a piece called The HOA that went too far. It went viral, then national. Podcasts wanted interviews. TV producers called, asking if I'd sit for a documentary. I told them no. I was done talking to cameras. The story wasn't about me. It was about boundaries and the cost of forgetting why they exist. The weeks after the trial felt strange. Peace is noisy when you've lived inside conflict. I'd wake at 5 out of habit, check the feeds, and find nothing but wind moving through pines. I walked the perimeter each morning, boots crunching frost, mug warming my hands. The maple tree they'd planted for their fake park was still there, growing rooted deeper each season. I left it. It had learned to stand on the right side of the line. Neighbors from other states wrote me letters. One man in Nevada said my case helped him void a forged deed. A woman in Arizona used our affidavit template to get her own HOA sanctioned. Somebody from Florida sent a photo of his new sign that read "Private Land. It's no committee." It made me laugh loud enough to scare the crows off the railing. Peace finally returned in chapters, not as a single moment. One day I noticed I could leave my door unlocked for 10 minutes without thinking about it. Another day I realized the flag above the porch had faded from red to rose, and I didn't mind. Fading means it's been flying a long time. I still sit out here most evenings. Sometimes I sip coffee from the same mug my father used, the handle chipped where his thumb rested. Sometimes I just listen to the wind move through the cedars and pretend it's him saying, "You measured right this time." Cabin is quiet again. The only papers on my desk are maps for fishing trips and old letters from people who finally feel brave enough to fight back where they live. I don't offer legal advice. I just tell them what my father told me. Keep your records clean and your boundaries clear. The maple tree outside casts a long shadow across the yard when the sun drops. It's taller than the fence now, branches reaching both directions like it's bridging a dispute that no longer exists. Maybe that's how truth works. You plant it in the right soil and step back. It finds its own balance. You don't win by shouting. You win by standing taller than the noise.